When my wife said she was driving out to see her sick sister, I didn't question it. Knew her sister had lupus flare-ups from time to time, so I kissed Claire on the cheek, told her to drive safe, and went back to sanding the porch railing. It was a Thursday, gray, still air, the kind of day that smelled of sawdust and wet leaves. Around 7, I got hungry, and since I was already driving into town to check on one of our contractors, I figured I'd stop by Hudson's Grill, our little family restaurant. Funny, right? A place we built together. The lights were on, people were laughing inside. Normal Thursday night stuff. Then I saw her. She was sitting by the window, in that soft yellow light, laughing at something. Her hair fell over her shoulder, just the way it always did when she was flirting. Across from her sat Tom, my best friend since college. They weren't touching, not quite, but their bodies leaned toward each other in a way I hadn't seen in years. My first thought was that I must have been wrong, that maybe she'd stopped for dinner on the way. Maybe Tom had just run into her. I parked anyway. When I walked in, they didn't see me right away. I stood for a second, watching her tilt her head, the little crease by her eye when she smiled. She looked happy. Really happy. I'd forgotten what that looked like on her face. Then she glanced up, and the color drained. Tom froze mid-laugh, his jaw stiffening like stone. The whole place suddenly felt too quiet. I walked up, pulled out a chair, and sat down right between them. "Tasty?" I asked. Tom tried to chuckle. "Mike, hey man, it's not—" I looked at him, just looked. No anger, no shouting, no scene. Claire's hand was trembling around her glass. "I thought you were with your sister," I said softly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out, just air. I leaned back, let out a slow breath. "You picked a nice spot," I said, eyes on the candle between them. Cozy, familiar. Nobody spoke. The waitress hovered a few feet away, pretending to wipe menus. The smell of grilled meat suddenly turned sour in my stomach. I stood up. "Enjoy your dinner," and I walked out, past the window where our reflections blurred in the glass. 3 ghosts who once believed in loyalty. Outside, the night felt colder than it should have been. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. It was just quiet, too quiet. That's when I realized something had snapped. Not loud, not violent, just a clean, irreversible break. I woke up the next morning to silence. The kind of silence that feels like a stranger sitting in your house. The bed was cold on her side. I could still smell her shampoo on the pillow. Lavender and something sweet. For a second, I almost believed she'd come back that night and slipped out before dawn. Then I saw the note on the kitchen counter. 2 words. "We need time." No apology. No explanation. Just that. I made coffee, though I couldn't taste it. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Every object had a ghost behind it. The chairs we bought at a flea market, the photo of us at the lake, her scarf hanging on the back of the door. Each thing felt like proof of something I'd lost. By 10 a.m., I was sitting at my desk, staring at invoices from a project Tom and I were managing together. Numbers, contracts, delivery dates, everything neat, everything in place. Just like my marriage had looked from the outside. I should have been angry. I should have thrown something, yelled, called her, called him. But nothing came, only clarity. I started counting, not in dollars, but in pieces of myself. 15 years together. 2 kids who believed in us. A home we built with our own hands. I realized how long I'd been pretending not to see what was right in front of me. The distance, the excuses, the late nights, the sudden trips. She hadn't fooled me. I just let her. By noon, I had 3 boxes lined up in the living room. I folded her clothes neatly, placed her books, her jewelry, even the framed photos she loved. No bitterness, just order. She could have them all. When I finished, I sat down, looking at the boxes. That's when it hit me. I didn't owe her a scene. I didn't owe Tom an explanation. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the one left behind. I wasn't broken. I was empty. And emptiness can be rebuilt. Somewhere inside that quiet, a plan began to take shape. I didn't know what it was yet. I just knew I couldn't let them walk away clean. They'd built their lie inside the world I created, and now it was mine to dismantle. I opened my laptop and began scrolling through emails, contracts, receipts, tracing their steps, following the trail they probably thought I'd never see. Every click steadied me. By the time the sun went down, I'd stopped shaking. The pain had turned into something sharper, colder. Resolve. Claire and Tom still thought I was the same man who'd walked out of that restaurant. In silence. They had no idea that silence was just the sound of the fuse being lit. I didn't sleep that night. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a ticking clock. Around 3 a.m., I stopped pretending I'd get any rest and sat at my desk again. The screen glow was harsh against the dark, but it felt right. Cold light for cold work. I opened the shared drive where Tom and I stored project files. We'd built houses together, run a small construction firm, two friends who trusted each other more than accountants. That trust had become a perfect hiding place. At first, everything looked clean. But when I compared the numbers from last quarter to the invoices on my local copy, something didn't add up. A few payments had been redirected. Small amounts, almost invisible. 1,500 here, 3,000 there. Then I found the name Miller & Sons Consulting. It didn't belong to any of our subcontractors. I checked the address. It was a P.O. box. The signature on the invoices? Tom's. I leaned back in the chair and let out a slow exhale. So that was the game. He wasn't just after my wife. He was inside my business too. For a moment, I almost laughed. It wasn't the angry kind of laugh. More like disbelief at how far people will go when they think you're too loyal to notice. I started printing copies. Every file, every email chain. The sound of the printer filled the house like a pulse. By dawn, I had a neat pile of evidence on the table. But the more I stared at it, the less it looked like victory. It felt fragile. What if I was wrong? What if this was some mix-up, a clerical error? Maybe I was just a paranoid husband looking for patterns that weren't there. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Tom's contact. Then I stopped. Talking wouldn't fix this. Talking was how I'd lost control in the first place. Instead, I called a friend. Not a close one. Just a quiet man named Roger, who'd done freelance accounting for us years ago. I asked if he could take a discreet look at some numbers. No details. Just a favor. He hesitated, then agreed. By afternoon, he called back. His tone was cautious. Mike, he said, whatever's going on between you two, Tom's been bleeding you for months. That company's a shell. Money's disappearing into it. Your signature's on a few of the forms, too. I froze. My signature? Forged, sloppy, but good enough to pass a quick look. The line went quiet. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there. For a long while. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with the smell of ink and betrayal. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. The pain that had been swirling like a storm finally sharpened into direction. They thought they'd built their lie out of love and business. I was about to show them what truth looked like when you stripped the warmth away. I spent the next 2 days pretending everything was normal. Answered calls, checked in with clients, even sent Tom a message about meeting next week to discuss future projects. He replied with his usual fake warmth. Sure thing, buddy. It almost made me smile. He thought the silence meant Surrender. He had no idea. It was strategy. On Monday morning, I drove downtown to meet with an attorney named Grant Bishop, a man I'd hired once before to help with a property dispute. He was efficient, discreet, the kind of lawyer who never asked personal questions. I slid the folder across his desk. Invoices, bank records, screenshots of emails. "I need to know what I'm looking at," I said. He flipped through the papers quietly. His expression never changed, but when he looked up, his voice was colder. "If these numbers are accurate, your partner's been committing fraud under your business name. Enough to get him charged. You could sue, maybe even press criminal charges." I nodded. "Not yet." He studied me. "You're not here for a lawsuit, are you?" "No," I said. "I'm here for control." That afternoon, I froze all shared business accounts. Legally, I had the right. My name was still on everything. I didn't call Tom. I didn't warn him. I wanted him to feel the walls start closing. Slowly, silently. The next morning, the call came. "Mike, what the hell's going on?" His voice cracked with forced authority. "Our funds are locked. I've got suppliers calling me." "Must be a banking issue," I said evenly. "I'll look into it." "Don't mess with me," he snapped. "We're in this together." I almost laughed at that. "We were," I said, "until you decided to take what wasn't yours." Silence. Then he lowered his voice. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know enough." He cursed under his breath. "You're making a mistake. Think about your family, man." That last word, family, hit a nerve. My jaw tightened. "You mean the one you helped destroy?" He started to say something, but I hung up. That night, Claire showed up. She didn't knock, just walked in like it was still her home. Her face was pale, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "Tom said you're trying to ruin him," she said. "Mike, please, this isn't you." "No," I said. "It's who I should have been all along." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't move. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "You don't get to cry in this house," I said quietly. She left without another word. The next day, Tom sent a lawyer's letter, threats of business defamation and illegal interference. It almost made me laugh. They were cornered, and they knew it. I didn't respond. I just sat on the porch that night, the air cool against my skin, and for the first time since that dinner, I felt something close to calm. They thought I'd hit my limit. They were wrong. This was just the foundation. The house hadn't even started to burn yet. A week passed. The storm quieted on the surface, but underneath, I could feel them moving. Little messages, little tests. Tom stopped calling. Instead, I started getting texts from Claire. "Can we talk? Please, just once." I ignored the first few. By the fifth, she sent a picture. The kids when they were small, sitting on my shoulders at the lake. "You don't have to do this, Mike. We can fix it." Fix it. That phrase made me laugh out loud, the sound dry and bitter. You can't fix a knife after it's been twisted. You just stop bleeding long enough to see where it went in. 2 nights later, she came by again. I almost didn't open the door, but I did. She stood there, hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes red like she hadn't slept. "Tom's scared," she said right away. "He thinks you'll go to the police." "Maybe I will," I said. "Mike, please," she whispered. "We were stupid. I was stupid. But you don't want this to get ugly. Think about the kids." That line again, the kids, as if she hadn't thought about them while sneaking around behind my back. I looked at her carefully. "You're not here for forgiveness," I said. "You're here because you're losing control." She blinked, her mouth opening like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She just stood there, staring at me like she didn't recognize who I'd become. "Go home, Claire," I said quietly. "Whatever home you have left." When the door closed, the silence was almost merciful. That night, I went back to my computer. I started collecting everything: screenshots, bank statements, phone logs. I organized them into folders labeled by date, by amount, by lie. Cold, meticulous work. It was strangely peaceful. A few days later, Tom tried a different approach. A voicemail this time. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "Mike, listen, I think we both said things we didn't mean. How about we meet, have a drink, talk like old times?" Old times. The nerve. I didn't delete the message. I saved it. Every word was a brick in the wall I was building between us. One that would never come down. By the weekend, I'd met with my accountant again. Together, we traced every fraudulent payment. I now had enough to bury Tom in legal paperwork, so deep he'd choke on it. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. Not until everything was in place. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The anger had cooled into something harder, smoother, a kind of steel calm. I'd stopped reacting. I'd started planning. And that scared them more than anything I could have said. They wanted me emotional, broken, begging. Instead, I was quiet, methodical, watching. Because that's the thing about silence. It doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it's just the sound of the knife being sharpened. The following week, I drove out to the lake house. I hadn't been there since last summer. The place still smelled of cedar and rain. The air was cold, sharp, and clean. Nothing like the heaviness that hung over town. I needed quiet, distance. I told myself it was a break, but truth was I was stalling. I'd built the plan, collected proof, and still hadn't pulled the trigger. Something in me needed to breathe before it all came crashing down. That's where I ran into Sarah. She used to run the local diner before her husband left her for a younger woman. She didn't know about Tom and Claire. Or maybe she did, people always do. But she looked at me the way people who've been broken recognize each other. We talked. Not about revenge, not about betrayal. Just about surviving. She said something I didn't expect. "You can't win if you're still playing their game," she told me. "You have to change the rules." Those words sat with me for days. Change the rules. I'd been fighting on their terms, reacting to their lies, their guilt, their fear. Maybe it was time to stop being the man who needed to prove he'd been wronged. Maybe I could be the one who defined what right looked like now. I drove back home that weekend. The house felt different. Not empty this time, but ready. Like it was waiting for something. On Monday, Claire and Tom showed up together. I heard their car before I saw them. The knock was soft, polite, rehearsed. When I opened the door, they both smiled, the kind of smile people wear when they're hiding a knife behind their back. "Mike," Tom started, voice calm, hands open. "We should talk. All this tension isn't good for anyone." I didn't answer. Claire stepped forward. "We know things got messy. We want to fix it. No lawyers, no drama." Her tone was sugar, but her eyes were hard. This wasn't peace. It was control, dressed as kindness. Tom glanced at her, then back at me. "You've made your point," he said. "You scared us. Congratulations. Now let's end this before it gets worse." I almost smiled. "You think this is about scaring you?" I said. "No, it's about truth." Tom's jaw tightened. "You're not the man I knew." "Good," I said. "That man trusted you." For a second, the mask slipped. Anger flickered across his face. Claire reached for his arm, whispering something under her breath, but I didn't care what it was. I just stepped back and closed the door. Through the wood, I heard Tom mutter, "He's lost it." Maybe I had, but for the first time, I didn't feel like the crazy one. I felt awake. When their car pulled away, I exhaled. Slow, steady. Fear was still there. Yes, but it wasn't stopping me anymore. It was fuel now. They thought they could twist guilt into mercy. They thought my silence was weakness. They were wrong on both counts. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. the kind of place where truth and lies sit on the same bench, waiting for their turn. I'd never been there for anything serious before. Parking tickets, maybe a zoning permit. But that morning, walking through the doors with my folder of evidence, I felt strangely calm. Tom was already there, standing beside his lawyer, expensive suit, fake confidence. Claire sat behind them in a gray coat, trying to look small and harmless. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she looked at me, and I saw the flicker of accusation in her eyes, the way people look at the fire they started and blame the wind for spreading it. The judge was brisk, practical. No drama, no sympathy. Just documents, signatures, statements. My lawyer spoke first, presenting the paper trail. False invoices, forged approvals, missing funds. One by one, the pages landed on the table like stones dropped into water. Each splash took another piece of Tom's arrogance with it. Tom's lawyer tried to argue. Clerical errors. Misunderstandings between partners. He gestured toward me like I was some emotional husband looking for vengeance. But when the judge asked about the signatures, my supposed approvals, he hesitated. I stood. "If those are my signatures," I said quietly, "then let's prove it." The judge nodded. "We'll order a handwriting analysis." That's when it cracked. Tom's jaw tensed. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You think I'd risk everything over a few $1,000s?" Grant, my attorney, didn't even look up. "It's not a few thousand. It's 87,000, Mr. Nolan. All verified." The room went still. Claire shifted in her seat, her breath catching audibly. 87? She whispered. Tom turned on her, hissed, "Not now!" That was it. The moment the mask fell. The courtroom wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. Claire's face went white. I could see the realization settle in. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd used her too. She stood up suddenly, blurting out, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." The judge banged the gavel once, calling for order. Tom muttered something under his breath, and for a split second, I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he shoved the table, sending papers scattering across the floor. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering frantically. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched. The judge ordered a recess. As everyone stood, Tom turned to me, his face red with fury. "You think you've won? You just burned everything." I met his eyes. "No, Tom. You did that when you lied." Outside, in the hallway, Claire tried to speak to me, but I walked right past her. The sound of her voice, pleading, breaking, followed me until I stepped outside into the cold. For the first time in months, the air felt clean. Inside that courtroom, something fundamental had shifted. The truth wasn't just out, it was irreversible. And for them, that was the beginning of the end. The ruling came faster than anyone expected. 2 weeks later, the court froze all of Tom's assets pending investigation. His company, the one he'd built out of mine, was shut down for audit. His lawyer withdrew. The story made it to the local paper. Construction partner accused of fraud and forgery. It wasn't national news, but in a town like ours, it was enough to kill a reputation forever. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no quiet satisfaction, just stillness. The kind that comes after a storm has torn through and left only debris behind. Tom called once after the ruling. One message, no words, just his breathing. Ragged, uneven. Then a click. That was the last I ever heard from him. Claire didn't show up at court again. She sent an email instead. A few paragraphs about confusion, regret, getting caught up in things. Not once did she write the word sorry. I deleted it without replying. People around town started whispering, as they always do. Some looked at me with pity, others with a kind of cautious respect. I didn't need either. All I wanted was distance. One evening, I drove out to the construction site where it had all started, the new residential block Tom had pitched as our next big thing. The half-finished houses stood quiet under the sunset, skeletal frames catching the light. I walked through what would have been a living room, the floor still raw concrete. I could almost see it. The dream we once had, two men building something honest. That dream was dead now, and in its place stood something colder but cleaner. Truth. When I got home, there was another letter waiting on the porch. Not from lawyers this time, but from the bank. Confirmation that the accounts were officially under my name again. My company. My work. My future. I poured a glass of bourbon and sat by the window. Outside, the world looked exactly the same. The street lights, the rustling trees, the distant hum of cars. But inside me, everything had shifted. People talk about revenge like it's fire, something that burns bright and fast. They're wrong. It's ice. It moves slow. It freezes everything it touches, and when it's done, what's left is clarity. Tom lost everything, the business, his home, his reputation. I didn't need to destroy him. The truth did that for me. As for Claire, she left town. Rumor was she tried moving in with her sister, but that didn't last. Someone said she was living in a small apartment on the east side, working part-time, keeping her head down. I didn't go looking. There was nothing left to say, and even less left to feel. The victory didn't taste sweet. It just tasted clean. And after all that rot, all that deceit, clean was enough. A year passed. Seasons changed quietly, one folding into the next without drama. The court case was long over. The business rebuilt. Hudson Construction was smaller now, leaner, steadier, honest. I stopped trying to chase growth for its own sake. Every contract, every wall we put up, I oversaw myself. Not because I didn't trust anyone, because I'd learned that trust had to be earned every single day. Josh came home from college that summer, taller, calmer, with a seriousness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He didn't ask much about what had happened, but once, late at night, sitting by the fire pit, he said, "I'm glad you didn't let them break you, Dad." I didn't answer. Just nodded. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Ellie still talked to her mother sometimes. I never stopped her. She was old enough to make her own choices. When she came back from those visits, she was quieter. Once she said, "Mom's not doing great." I said I hoped she found her peace. I meant it. You can't carry hate forever. It turns to rust inside you if you do. I saw Claire once, months later, at a grocery store. She didn't notice me at first. She was in a worn coat, hair tied back, counting change at the register. Her eyes looked tired. There was no fire left in them, just emptiness. For a moment, I felt that old ache stir. But it wasn't love or anger. It was distance, the kind that time builds between two people who once shared everything. She caught my eye as I turned away. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. I left before she could. Tom, as far as I heard, moved to another state after declaring bankruptcy. Someone told me he tried starting over, but his name followed him like a shadow. The last rumor was he was drinking, bouncing from job to job, burning every bridge he crossed. Me? I started spending more time at the lake house. I fixed the dock, replaced the old boards, sanded the railing until the wood felt smooth again. It was quiet there. Birds, wind, water. No lies, no ghosts. Sometimes Sarah stopped by, bringing coffee and too much advice. We'd sit by the water, not talking much. She understood the kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that heals. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I drove back into town. Out of habit, I stopped by Hudson's Grill, the same restaurant where everything had shattered. New owners now, new faces. I sat at the same table, ordered coffee, and watched the world move outside the window. No anger, no grief, just peace. People think revenge ends when the enemy falls. They're wrong. It ends when you stop looking back. Theirs was a slow collapse, a quiet, merciless undoing. Mine was a quiet rebirth. And in that small moment, sipping coffee where my life had cracked open, I realized something simple and final. I hadn't lost everything. I'd finally reclaimed myself.